Sexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome to Point of View on this Tuesday, July 16, 2019. I am your host, Nick Pitts. So grateful that you have decided to join us today. I've got at the Millennial Roundtable, Chelsey Youman. She's got a new organization that she is a part of that she'll be sharing with us here in a little bit. But Chelsey, it's been forever. I haven't seen you in such a long time.
I know, it's been a while. Had a few changes. I'm really excited to share with our Point of View audience today.
I cannot wait to hear about those a little bit more. And then we've also got David Fraga. How are you, David?
Doing great, Nick.
So good. So good to have you here. And to our audience, a couple of you actually emailed me and were wondering where I was at. It's always nice to be missed. And so I'm grateful to be alive. I'm grateful I like to consider myself a little bit more holy, but not in the sense of there was no holes that were put into me. I got a chance to take a little vacation, and I have been convinced about thrill seeking and taking risks lately, and so I decided to go run with the bulls.
You've gotten in touch with your inner 7 on the Enneagram. Welcome. It's a nice place to be.
Yeah. So there's a study that was put out a couple of years ago. Social scientists put out a study that indicated he sent out this just general call that if you're facing a significant risk, then you need to, and you feel paralyzed by it, then why don't you, he volunteered and said, I'll make the decision for you. So a significant decision, rather not significant risk, but a significant decision involved things like moving, changing jobs, asking that person to marry you, something that was very weighty, and they felt paralyzed to the extent that they felt good either way that they would go. So either saying yes and taking the risk, or saying no and sticking to the status quo. And what he found is that 26,000 Americans responded to him. A social scientist out of Chicago said,
"It's a lot of decisions to make for people."
Yeah. And so what they did is he flipped a coin on the computer, and these people said that they would abide by the coin. Heads, they take the risk. Tails, stick to status quo. And what the scientists found is that individuals that took the risk were more happy regardless of outcome than individuals that didn't take the risk. And so it obviously, from a Christian perspective, you can't help but think about the treasure hidden in a field, which a man finds and goes and hides again, and for everything sells all that he has in order that he might purchase the field. The Christian life is one filled with risks and opportunities. And so that's been stirring in my head. And so I wanted to make sure that I gave a little bit of time during vacation to read about risk, but also to take a few risks and to run with the bulls and jump off cliffs and
ask someone to marry you. Just all those big decisions at once. Both of you,
Mom,
go for
I think
it.
this is the best time to tell you now. Surprise! No, I'm just kidding. But I did jump off a couple cliffs. But nevertheless, so grateful to be back here with you all, and good to be missed as well. But also, I'm not the only one that took. I took stupid risks. You're taking very smart, measured. It's totally a needed risk.
I don't know if it's smart or crazy, but I'm sure I'm happy.
Okay.
I mean, I'm excited.
So tell us a little bit about this new venture,
Sure.
Chelsey.
So I have been waiting months. Frankly, this is the first place I'm publicly announcing this. So the Point of View audience, I really do feel is a type of family. So I really wanted to announce it here. I'm really excited. I'm starting a brand new endeavor in the pro-life realm. And so could not be more thrilled or led, frankly, by the Lord to join this arena. So I will no longer be with First Liberty. I know you guys are used to hearing me say, all my religious liberty mumbo jumbo, but what I am doing is just another passion of mine, an extension of my service in my career to the Lord. And what I'll be doing is working with an organization called Youman Coalition. And for our audiences, I know we're in Texas right now. They are in North Texas, in the Frisco area. And Youman Coalition, for the last 10 years, has served women and rescued their children and empowered them to be mothers and parents. And they've done that through a really incredible holistic approach. They've really dedicated their ministry, and it's grown in the last 10 years to be the biggest pro-life ministry in the country. They've got clinics, sonogram buses, everything you can imagine. Social workers, they stabilize women's conditions. It's a holistic approach which I firmly believe is necessary to resolving this problem of abortion. And they seek out the most underserved women in our entire country, which is the abortion-seeking woman, okay? So they have done a great job on the clinic side, but it became really apparent that that wasn't really enough to contend with the real competitor, the Goliath in the room, which is Planned Parenthood. And Planned Parenthood is so powerful and such a conglomerate because of their government connections, because of their ability to get funding and money between local, state, and federal government. And so we at Human Coalition are now the counterpart to that, to be the real competitor and contender with Planned Parenthood. Human Coalition decided to open up a lobbying branch, which we're going to connect the grassroots, those who are serving women. We're going to empower them by connecting them to the government officials and coming up with policies that really enable other clinics and other groups in the entire pro-life movement to do what they do best, which is serve women and rescue children. And I'm so excited to be the state director in Texas, to start working out these policies and dealing with our governing officials to really push the pro-life movement to the next level.
That's phenomenal. So so Human Coalition, again, it's a gold standard brand that's just been doing such great work on the ground, not only just fighting for life, but creating a culture of life, which I think are two distinct things. One, to be able to provide women with resources necessary to know that they can do it, to have the child. The second being to be the individuals and entities to really help that in that movement as well. And the second part, it seems like now that you're going to be on the governmental side.
Yep.
And so really advocating for helping to figure out what are the systemic ways that we can be able to create cultures of life as well.
Right. So how Human Coalition discusses this is they refer to it as a national rescue system. They say in order for abortion to really end, we need a nationwide rescue system for women and their children, their preborn children. And so in order to do that, we have to delve into the government. We have to be, the first real genuine competitor out there with Planned Parenthood, getting the funds and empowering those who are already serving women and children. And that can be accomplished through everything from those organizations that are doing safe houses for women in domestic abuse situations, to just helping counsel women in how to be parents and enabling them. I think one of the biggest statistic that has stuck out to me, I've learned since this endeavor really has started, is that 75% of abortion-seeking women say, if my circumstances were different, I would want to parent. 75%.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if we can change those circumstances, use the systems we have in place and the policies that we need. And by the way, in the state of Texas, this is a Texas audience, our representatives and senators care deeply about this issue. In closed door meetings with them, I cannot tell you how pro-life and concerned they are. And they say, we're a bunch of white men. Nobody wants to hear from us. But will you help us get the right policies in place? Will you use the great evidence bank that Human Coalition has developed by talking to the women they're serving?
Yeah.
Hey, how can we really move the meter on this? And we're going to turn that knowledge into policy, which I think we're going to see a real sea change in this movement. So I could not be more excited.
I can't wait. And so I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask you about some of the things that are happening here in Texas, but we have to take a break right now. But when we come back from the break, more about Chelsey's new change, and specifically what are some of the ways in which you can connect with Chelsey, one, at this new position, but then also, two, what are some of the interesting things that we can do to really help create that type of change, and what are some opportunities that are available on the legislative front to be able to create more of a culture for life. But we've got to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Are single-parent families just as good for children as two-parent families? Some of the headlines recently in newspapers and news magazines seem to say so. But all you have to do is look back at academic studies to see that, in nearly every case, two parents are better than one. One older family study deserves renewed attention. Dr. Patrick Fagan, using data from the National Survey of Children's Health, found two important factors. Children who grow up in an intact family and attend religious services do better than children who do not. There is a significant discrepancy between children who grew up in intact two-parent families and those who came from broken homes. They also found a similar discrepancy between those who attend religious services weekly and those who worship less frequently. They found that children in the former groups were 5 times less likely to repeat a grade, less likely to have behavior problems at home and school, and more likely to be cooperative and understanding of others' feelings. They also found that these differences held true even after controlling for family income and poverty, as well as for the parents' education level, race, and ethnicity. In essence, the study suggests that the best prescription for society is a stable family and family worship. In this environment, children thrive emotionally and achieve academically. You know, in a sense, the study is a flip side of studies that were published years ago about the impact of divorce on children. In my book, Christian Ethics in Plain Language, I talk about the 3 E's of negative impact of divorce. That would be emotional impact, educational impact, and economic impact. So whether you look at these positive studies or the earlier negative studies, you can see the importance of family and worship. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman and David Fraga. And David, we just found out, what is with all this news that's...
Man,
I wish I had an alert.
You're getting back from vacation in Spain.
And maybe I should just have a breaking news alert or something like that. Maybe, Andrew, we can come up with something, like some random... I know Andrew loves it when I just say something last minute. Wow. But nevertheless, you're joining, you've got a new venture that you're a part of. You're starting in...
So 2 main things. The first thing is, I'm part-time with adult ministries at Gateway.
Okay.
So Dallas campus, which is such an honor and a blessing. And the other thing is Kingdom Initiative. So we're now starting to do events as well. And that's the nonprofit that we do. It's a media network that we use media to build the kingdom. So we work with nonprofits as well as anyone else who wants to make videos and whatnot.
Because you've been like the entrepreneur connoisseur, to say the very least, and I'm like shocked. That's like more syllables than I've ever uttered.
Not true.
So you've you're stepping back, or you're redirecting some of your entrepreneurial activities.
Yes.
And going to be directing a lot of those now, because you've been doing consulting type work with Gateway for a little bit, and so now giving more of those efforts towards that end.
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest thing I've been doing is really just serving and volunteering whatever they needed. And definitely what's on my heart is young adults and men's ministry. And that's just literally what I've been doing, just whatever I can do to help and serve.
Yeah.
And I think it's amazing because I loved how when Chelsey was talking about how the Lord is directing her.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about what I'm doing now. And he's saying, hey, like, I've been equipping you. I've been getting you connected to certain people in order to train you up to do exactly what I want you to do right now in this season.
That's great.
So
that's great. Well, congratulations on that particular end. So, Chelsey, back to you and all your news. And I mean, I had fake news of I'm married. No, but this is like real news. And so let's dig down a little bit deeper into this. Yeah. Because again, Texas we've seen throughout the country across this previous legislative session, there's been instances such as in Alabama and in Missouri, et cetera, of all these abortion bills, these heartbeat bills that are being passed. But one of the interesting things is Texas wasn't one of those states that really made that big push, or at least broke through the news when it comes to kind of some of the pro-life movement, making legislative gestures towards that particular end. And so for our listening audience, it's primarily in Texas right now. And though for those outside of Texas, know that Texas operates every other year. And so they won't be in session next year, but they'll be in session the following year. What are some of those opportunities that you're seeing right now so far in advance that can be that are opportunities for the pro-life community to really get behind at a state level?
Sure. So first and foremost, I just want to say that I know that we have been in the trenches on the pro-life movement. Yeah. Those of us who are passionate about life, regardless of if it's your career or just something you support or care about, for over 45 years now, 46 years. So it's been a long time coming, but I have so much hope that I really think we are on like a turning point for our movement. We have won hearts and minds for the first time ever in the last few years. The polls are showing that millennials are pro-life. We have the most pro-life population that has ever existed since Roe versus Wade. And that's for a lot of reasons that we can talk about later. But because of that, I am really hopeful that politics and policy are downstream of that pro-life culture. And so we have more pro-life judges being appointed than ever. And so when I look at states who are doing great work and doing heartbeat bills, which essentially says after a heartbeat is detected in a sonogram, that baby can no longer be killed, or pain-capable bills, things like that. Those are great measures being passed in other states that we're going to start, I'm sure, in the next 2 years to see the results of play out in the courts. And so Texas, that was a brand new thing that happened in this session. Texas had some similar bills filed that didn't go anywhere, but I think we'll know a lot more in the next few years what the courts are willing to do. And Texas did some really, really great things on the pro-life side. They fully and permanently defunded Planned Parenthood. So in the entire state, they will be closing down. I mean, that's great. And they passed a bill that said local municipalities can't give Planned Parenthood the leg up they've been doing. So no more free leases, no more handouts. So a lot of the Planned Parenthoods are closing in our state. They did a great counseling measure that Senator Paxton, she put up, and it passed. And that really gives women a lot more information about what they're going to undergo. And statistics show that women have a lot less PTSD after an abortion decision if they went in with more knowledge. And so there were great measures passed. Those are just a few to name, but I know that they have the disabilities bill where you can't discriminate based on a child's disability in the womb. There were measures passed, and I think we're going to see more of that, frankly, on the horizon as the court makeup has changed. That's really, to me, one of the biggest game changers. And frankly, President Trump is the one to thank for that. He is the one bulldozing those appointments through, and really has, I think, going to be probably the game changer for the pro-life movement.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. And so when you think about opportunities that are on the horizon, do you think Texas has the chance to be kind of the leader? Is what it just because
I certainly hope so. We absolutely do. We have such a pro-life. We have a pro-life representatives. We have pro-life senator majority. This is many of their number one ticket issues, and in a genuine, passionate way, they genuinely care about this issue. And they're really just looking for someone to be a reliable legal expert to them on, hey, these are the types of policies we need. These are the legal trends. And with God willing, I'll be that expert for them, and we can really get on the right path. Awesome. We are on the right path, but continue in that hard-hitting direction. So just so everyone knows, Human Coalition Action is the name of my organization, and you can go to humancoalition.org right now. HUCO Action is so new that our website is not completely up yet. So go to humancoalition.org and submit a request. You can support us financially. Right now, we're still in those early phases where we need we just have a lot of financial needs to get this up and running and make it successful. So go to humancoalition.org and specifically say this is for, the lobbying effort you guys are starting.
I think that's one of the, I was on another outlet yesterday, and I was talking with a friend, with a new friend, really. It turned out the media outlet put us together because I was representing the right and he was representing the left.
Don't you love when they do that?
So we were, but it was a helpful interview just because we both weren't listeners, I hope you know that I'm not a flamethrower. I want to do my best to understand and then try to persuade the other side. And so it was very helpful for me because knowing Chelsey, knowing that this was going on in Chelsey's life, to be able, when the abortion topic came up in our conversation, to know that it's not simply just because I think there's been such an emphasis upon just forcing the end of abortion, that one of the things that I think Human Coalition is so beautiful and has done so well is to create a culture of life, to be able to come alongside these mothers and be pro-women in this measure. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful that you've joined them, and no better person to join them in the efforts to be able to continue that legacy and to continue this push to try not just to make abortion illegal, but to make abortion unthinkable, which I think is one of the trademarks of Human Coalition. And I'm just really excited that you're a part of this.
Yes, I could not be more hopeful and excited. I know we talk about this issue a lot on our show, and it's one, we're all passionate here, but I know our listeners are passionate as well. And so I hope that they hear, like, there is hope out there on this issue, and there are people who want that next generation progressive, in the good sense of the word, approach to this issue. And so we're working really hard on our to make that happen.
Very good. Okay, so for our Facebook audience, here's what we're going to do. Since this is so brand new, that we didn't, you saw on the graphic, if you're watching on Facebook right now, we didn't even update the cryon to this. And so what we're going to do on Facebook is we're going to put her new organization's information up on Facebook. Will directly link to where you can go and sign up to find out more information on what Chelsey's up to, as well as find out opportunities that you might be able to go and support her as well. And so that'll be up on Facebook here as soon as I have to take us to a commercial break. And one of the other things that we're going to make sure that you're aware of is we're going to put a couple of more pieces of the new information just as a comment on there as well, right before or right after or during rather. I'll get there eventually. It's been 2 weeks, y'all. I've been in Spain. I haven't really had any responsibility whatsoever other than to feed myself, which isn't really a responsibility. It is a great privilege. But nevertheless, we're going to have to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to shift gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about the new policy that was put into place by the Trump administration relative to asylum. There's been some consternation. There's been a great bit of news that has broke just yesterday relative to the Trump administration's new changes relative to asylum. To one, what I would argue is to protect children and women that are traveling such far distances to be able to get to our borders so that they might be able to find safety in other countries. And then two, to be able to address the ongoing crisis that's happening at the border right now. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. But there's an alarming poll out that I'm not going to lie, that I'm pretty I'm pretty disheartened about relative to white evangelicals and their support and their understanding of the refugee. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we have got to go to a break right now. So during the break, be sure to go check facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'll have more information on Chelsey's new endeavor. But we'll be back right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman and David Fraga. We are now going to swiftly switch gears over to the immigration that has been just a part of the national dialogue for probably 40 plus years, but now has been a recent uptick as of late because of just the tremendous amount of individuals that are flooding our borders right now. There was a decrease in the number of individuals that were apprehended by Border Patrol agents this month, but we are seeing levels that we haven't seen since 2000 right now, upwards of 100,000 individuals that are flooding the lines. And so the Trump administration has been creatively thinking of new ways to be able to keep individuals from making that treacherous journey. Because so here, let me get to the policy that they put forward, and then help us to be able to understand the importance of this policy relative to the contextual kind of outlier characteristics that are a part of this. And so, according to USA Today, the Trump immigration change would all but end asylum requests for Central American migrants. Now, there was a little bit of a tilt there, so let's look into actually what it says. The Trump administration moved Monday to prevent most migrants from claiming political asylum in the United States, requiring them to make their claims in other countries first. The current proposal will, quote, decrease forum shopping by economic migrants and those who seek to exploit our asylum system to obtain entry to the United States, according to William Barr, who is our Attorney General. Under the new rule published Monday in the Federal Register, asylum seekers who pass through another country first will be ineligible for asylum at the U.S. southern border. So, for example, a Honduran who passes through Guatemala and Mexico would be barred from requesting asylum in the U.S. under the argument that they could have applied for asylum in either of those two countries. And so for context purposes, the U.S. granted asylum to 26,568 people in 2017. That's a 31% increase from 2016. And so the idea that suddenly we've shut down our borders to not allow anyone in, it's just false. We are continuing. We are much more positive on the granting of individuals to have asylum. According to some estimates, there are currently 18,700 asylum seekers on lists in Mexican border towns. If you'll remember, just last month, President Trump worked with the Mexican officials to be able to have Mexican officials begin to block individuals and to protect our borders from their side as well. But so that raises the question for us as to we know that there's a crisis that's happening right now, and what are ways that we can help stem this? One of the reasons why, and now again, I have my qualms with this particular bill, but I'm encouraged by the creative thinking of it, simply because the reality is the numbers are striking that the majority of women that make the march up to the U.S. are victims of sexual abuse and sexual violence as they make their way there. I'm keenly aware of what's happening at the border right now, where there are reports that babies are being rented and trafficked so that they're seen as moving past the border officials. And so in my mind, Chelsey, this just seems like another creative way. Now, granted, there's no such thing as a perfect policy when it comes to my immigration and especially the border, just because there are a wide variety of voices. But this seems like a creative first step, or a creative step, not even first step, a creative step that can be taken to be able to help calm this ongoing crisis that's happening at the border.
So just to make sure I'm kind of understanding, you covered a lot right there. The goal of the policy is the safety of the asylum seekers, or the goal is to minimize the amount of those able to seek asylum? I
think it would be both, right? I don't think I wouldn't know. Obviously, I haven't read into kind of some of the pre-meeting or some of the other secondary material, but I would imagine the goal would be, one, because we have so many individuals that are backlogged right now, the 18,000 right now that are asylum seekers right now, that we're backlogged on one particular instance with number of individuals that are trying to get in. And then two, we're recognizing the legitimacy of their desires, but just saying, you can go to another country as well. If you're trying to escape from something, you don't necessarily have to come to the U.S., even though that's your top choice. Apparently, there's other places.
Maybe I misunderstood the policy. The policy was if you have crossed another country's borders,
another country, you have to go try to apply for asylum there.
So you can apply for asylum. It just has to be from that location.
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
That was different. My understanding was you were no longer eligible for asylum.
You can no longer apply.
You
can't apply for asylum in the U.S. So, for example, if I'm in Nicaragua right now, I can't apply for asylum in the U.S. because I have to cross through other countries in which I have an ability to be able to apply for asylum.
Okay, so for me, that's the sticking point. Just a little bit of background on immigration law, which I did actually volunteer as an immigration lawyer on refugee and asylum cases. Okay. So I do have a little bit of background in this. A few things I think are really important for everybody to know and understand is that the standard is pretty specific for who is eligible to apply for refugee or asylum status. It is not just, well, we came across here and said we had a hard time in our past, so now we get to be a refugee or an asylum seeker. There's a pretty high bar that requires, there's an evidentiary standard. And so what that is there's, first of all, there's refugee status, which is someone who is applying from another country to come to our country as a refugee. And then there's asylum status. And asylum status is you left your home country because of the circumstances and are now here and you're in our country seeking asylum. And so for me, this is just locking out to me what real asylum is for in a negative way. And only 15 to 20% of asylum seekers get the status. So like I said, there's a high bar here. And the standards are if you are fleeing persecution or violence at home for your race, your religion, your ethnicity, and your sex, abuse, any of those things, you are allowed to seek asylum here. And I don't think that immigration law, frankly, the real problematic focus for limiting immigrants into our country should be the refugee or asylum status. There is a whole host of other populations coming into our country that we have laws on the books for that I think the focus, the resources, and the time and effort there, that's where that should be. It should not be the asylum seeker to me. Unless there is a tangible evidentiary benefit to saying this is actually protecting women and children in the migrant process from abuse. That's the only viable argument that I would say for limiting asylum seekers.
And that's where I would be. That's where I'm keen. Like what hits me very hard is the reality that the majority, I think it's like 60 to 70% of women that are with children or women alone that are making their way to the U.S. are going to be sexually abused on their way there. And so this is us being proactive to say, well, then let's limit that journey, because the longer that you're on that journey, it seems as though there's predators and prey all over the place.
If that's the impact, it would be a really good impact.
And I think that's one of the
I just hope we're not limiting their ability to be here at all.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Because there are people fleeing really
agree.
dangerous circumstances.
Completely agree.
I was under the impression that it just said if you cross a country line, you're not eligible anymore. And to me, I was like, well,
so there's some exceptions.
How do they get out of there?
There are some exceptions that they do have relative to that.
Okay.
But because I think that was one of the things that Matthew Sorens over at World Vision raised as well, because this would say individuals that say you're in Russia, of all places, and you're seeking after asylum. Well, this would limit your ability to be able to come to the U.S. to find asylum, because you're crossing a number of country border lines, which is problematic as well. What I'm just keenly aware of is that we find ourselves in a place right now where we're just overwhelmed, and in frustrating fashion that we want to direct our energies towards the president to express our frustration. But this isn't. To a certain degree, this might be a presidential issue, but I think the primary onus of responsibility falls upon the Congress right now, because the Congress is the one that draws the bills and makes the laws and appropriates the necessary funding to make sure that our Border Patrol agents and shelters have an ability to be fully substantiated. So it seems as though we've just misplaced this. David, what would you add?
I think this is just an attempt in order to, avoid what happened a couple months ago with that group of Honduranians who came in, and just a lot of them, I know the administration was talking about how a lot of them were gang members too. So just trying to protect the borders as well, and not having to rush military personnel and use a lot more money, U.S. money, in order to have to protect and arm up our borders,
Yeah, I think that one of the things that here's where I'm a little, there's some discombobulation. I'm discouraged is kind of what I teased it out in the opening, is there was a new poll that was put out that indicated that was measuring what the U.S.'s responsibility is relative to refugees. And we've got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, I'm going to share this poll that looks at, among religious groups, who thinks that we have a responsibility relative to the refugees. And these are some numbers that I think are pretty troubling from my perspective, and I'm going to be really interested to hear from the rest of the Millennial Roundtable. But we've got to take a break right now. But when we come back from the break, more from Point of View right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jeremy Morris likes to decorate for Christmas. Actually, that's underselling it by quite a bit. Jeremy Morris and his wife Christy decorate nearly every inch of their home with Christmas lights. The display in northern Idaho became such a hit at Christmas time, they decided to make it a community event. When folks would stop by to see the display, they would invite them onto their driveway for hot chocolate, a picture with Santa, and even an opportunity to share with them the biblical story of Christmas. When the Morrises decided to move into a new neighborhood, they looked at the Homeowners Association's covenants and didn't see any problem with the display. Still, wanting to be good neighbors, they gave the HOA a heads up. And that's when things took a turn. The HOA explained in a letter that some of our residents are non-Christians or of another faith, noting that they were concerned for the, quote, problems that could bring up, unquote. So on the basis of religion, they told them they could not decorate their house at Christmas, even though houses in the neighborhood are decorated for Halloween. So Jeremy filed a lawsuit, and a jury determined that the HOA violated the Fair Housing Act, engaging in religious discrimination. But soon after, a federal judge overruled the jury's verdict. First Liberty has taken on the appeal, hoping to restore the jury's verdict. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Let me ask you, what if America's best attorneys from the very top law firms got together to defend religious freedom in court? That's exactly what's happening at First Liberty. And the best news? We're winning over 90% of our legal actions. Come learn more at firstliberty.org. You'll be encouraged. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. This is, one of those things that I wish we could have had the microphone on, even though my skepticism would bleed through the microphone.
We're going to call this the segment, Nick, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Check yourself. Come on.
Okay, so I am concerned about a recent poll that came out relative to religious individuals. It was measuring religious audiences or irreligious audiences on, and the question was relative to, does the U.S. have a responsibility to accept refugees? Now here's what I do know. I'll preface this poll, and we'll talk about some of the implications from it here shortly. Here is what I do know, that we fall into the false dichotomy of saying we either have to turn our backs on every single refugee or we have to accept every single refugee. Both, I believe, are detrimental. I don't think our systems and structures are put into place within our communities that we can accept every single refugee to simply just eradicate every single wall and barrier. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that's good. I don't even think that's biblical. But I also equally don't think it's biblical, right, good, or healthy to simply say that we have to build up walls so high and turn our backs to individuals that are seeking after asylum that find themselves in difficult places and come from precarious situations. And so I think we're being sold a bill of goods right now. We're being sold beachfront property in Idaho when it says that we have to go to either let everybody in or let nobody in. But I would say I know my particular bent, and I think that there's got to be a place where we can say yes and amen to protecting our borders, but also yes and amen that we have to do something relative to the refugee that finds themselves at our borders right now because they're trying to escape from some difficult and precarious situation. So to the poll that I was referencing, a new poll came out and it measured the number of Americans who say the U.S. has a responsibility to accept refugees. 65% of religiously unaffiliated Americans said we do. 50% of Catholics said we do. And only 25% of white evangelicals said we have a responsibility. And so to highlight the two outliers that are, for me, the most striking in this particular point is that only 25% of Americans say we have white evangelicals, say we have a responsibility to accept the refugee. And 65% of religiously unaffiliated Americans said we do. Chelsey, when you hear those numbers, what are you thinking?
Why you gotta ask me first?
I don't know, because I like to argue with you a lot.
Okay, well, look, my first step is to always believe the best in people, and sometimes I think these polls are like really targeted in a certain way and bent on a certain way. So I just don't trust every poll I see. How did they ask the question? What I just don't know that that's an accurate representation of Christians' heart towards refugee and asylum seekers. So I always want to give the benefit of the doubt first and foremost, mostly to conservatives and Christians. I don't always love giving the benefit of the doubt to the other side. I'm working on it. But all that to say, in my mind, I think that it is a really popular narrative for the left to lump the right into a xenophobic category, right? And that is you're either all for immigration or you're not at all. And I think there are two really distinct divisions within immigration that are worth noting here. One category are those who are in desperate need of safe, healthy, non-abusive, or oppressive circumstances. That's the category for refugee and asylum seekers. And that is an entirely different category. We talked about this a little bit earlier, what the status for that is. It's usually people with verifiable evidence fleeing abuse or physically dangerous is the term, circumstances at home. The second category is those who illegally enter our country and then seek post hoc to become citizens. That to me is a category that I might be summarizing, callers calling out me if I'm wrong, but I think the Republicans get bent up on that, saying follow the laws to get here the legal way. Okay, so that's where I believe most conservatives in that statistic, they might be all lumping this together and say, yeah, we just want less immigration overall. But I don't know many Christians who would look in the eyes of a woman who's being battered at home, or like some of the people I've represented or advised regarding being a Christian in Iran and had death threats and had to flee their homes. Like, I don't see Christians just saying, we're not for that asylum seeker. I just don't believe it. I think that the Christian's heart is one towards caring for their neighbor. And I've seen really great come out of the Christian community. So I'm not going to take that statistic and just buy it at face value. I think they might be convoluting maybe a lot on the immigration issue. It's a nuanced issue.
Okay. David, your thoughts?
Well, these statistics are I think they're pretty broad, honestly. And so I think there needs to be a little bit more research done and looking into that. But I do agree that the church, I do believe that the church needs to get more involved in some areas with this. And I'm curious to even think about, as Chelsey was talking, I was really thinking about how those women and those people and those kids that are, abused and that need help and are really truly seeking asylum, is it maybe a question that we need to be asking? Okay, how can we actually be investing into those border towns who could be, seeking refuge there? I mean, these people could be seeking refuge there, but at the same time, a lot of the people, the reason when I talk to a few immigrants and have questions with them, they come to America to try to get a better life, not just to seek asylum in terms of escaping a bad circumstance, but just because they are trying to get a better life. But if we can try to provide a better avenue economically in some way, then investing in that would be a challenge. And so for me, I'm not sure what the right answer is with all that, but what I do know is this could be maybe a step in order to open a door for something else even more.
Right. And to David's point, what about all the border town churches that have opened up as shelters and are serving immigrants? I mean, we can't discount the good work that the evangelicals do and the amount of, they do support. I know you're about to debate me, but I'm going to give you time to do that. But I mean, no one is more charitable than the Big C Christian Church, Catholic or evangelical or otherwise. And so anything that portrays us as something else I don't always believe fair.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to discount the churches that are down at the border right now. I don't want to discount even the churches across the U.S. right now. They're doing great efforts and doing significant outreach to be able to help the refugees that find themselves in very precarious situations right now. I'm keenly aware of those. I'm keenly involved in some of those, and I don't want to discount any of those efforts. But I do want to pay attention to this number just because I think it's pretty alarming that it's so shockingly low, and probably the gut punch is when it's compared to religiously unaffiliated individuals, that those who have been given much and been shown much grace. I think this is a strong word, but I think I believe it. I'll go ahead and say it anyway. I just hate how we've fallen into this false dichotomy of whether we either have to turn our back completely because of the laws, or we can't, or we have to let everybody in spite of the laws. And so this idea of, on the left, you have to decriminalize citizenship, right, or immigration, right? Like, I think that there's a variety of things that can be done. And if you look at the biblical narrative, I'm just perplexed, and I'm just encouraged. Like, there's a variety of manifestations to show compassion to the refugee, to the immigrant. You've got Boaz that opened up his field to Ruth. You've got individuals like the Good Samaritan that paid for the hotel and the medical bills of the injured individual. You've got Rahab that was granted asylum. There's just a variety of different ways that we can show the love of Jesus. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we only see it, when we only see the right thing to do with refugees as completely letting them in. And I know this poll is set up to either be an all plus or all minus thing, but I want us to be a little bit more generous. I'd hope that we can become more generous individuals that see the stranger in the corner, because we were once one. We'll be back right after this.
Point of View is committed to spreading the truth, oftentimes a truth that those in political power don't like getting heard. But the only way it can be heard is if our team stands strong together, if you do what you can to support the Point of View Truth Team. It's having an impact, as we heard recently from U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert.
Everywhere I go, I hear people that you have influenced, that Point of View has affected. You have made such a difference, and you rely on people to contribute. And if they don't contribute, then that truth does not get heard.
Help Point of View make a difference. Pray and consider what level is right for you. $30, $65, $100 a month, or even more. Please do what you can. 1-800-347-5151, or visit online, pointofview.net. Look near the top right for the link that says Become a Monthly Partner. Join the Truth Team, 800-347-5151, and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of View, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
Hey, welcome to Point of View on this Tuesday, July 16th, 2019 day. As you can see, if you're watching on Facebook, I forgot what today is, and I literally had to lift my laptop to be able to see the sheet of paper that tells me the day. But it is so good to be back with you here in the U.S. and here at Point of View. It's good to be missed, but it's better to be back. And so grateful that you have decided to join us today for this Millennial Roundtable. We've got Chelsey Youman with us, as well as David Fraga, and we are so excited. I'm excited to be back here in the U.S. I took a little thing called a vacation. It had been a little bit since I did one of those things, and I found I can report to you all that they're relaxing.
I strongly recommend the vacation life.
It's good every once in a while.
And
sure.
so it was really good to take one of those things. And so I've been I was telling a few friends earlier about a social science study that I ran across, that individuals that take risks tend to be more happier regardless of the outcome of those risks. And so I spent some time not only reading about risk while I was away on vacation, but taking a few, namely trying to run with the bulls. And so thankfully I didn't come back more holy in the sense of getting gored, and hopefully enough time to spend with the Lord and be a little bit more like him. But that's probably subject to change, varying upon the second that you interact with me. But nevertheless.
Or the topics for today's conversation.
Yeah, or the topics for kind of going over the rundown. It's been a interesting day nonetheless, but we are so excited that you've decided to join us today on the show. We're going to talk a little bit about President Trump and the tweets that he sent out over the weekend, specifically on Sunday, and then the doubling down yesterday of some of those tweets relative to you can go back to your home country if you don't like what we're doing in this country, which is just a rough overview. And so we'll be taking some of your phone calls and debating some of the merits of those tweets, some holes in those tweets, and what the value of disagreement here in the U.S. as well as around the Millennial Roundtable. But I'm not the only one with news being that I'm back. There's much bigger news to announce around the Roundtable. And so I'm just going to let Chelsey have the floor, because I think the joy is emanating from her right now.
Yes.
And it's turning it's turning my jet lag.
I'm not expecting the way you're leading into this is like I have another pregnancy announcement.
There you go.
Well.
I have something. I'm so excited. I actually have not publicly announced this anywhere, because Point of View listeners, I truly feel like, are in a weird sense a part of my family, and this was really the first place I wanted to make this announcement. But I am no longer with First Liberty Institute practicing law. I am on a different adventure, a brand new initiative called Human Coalition Action, and I will be joining the pro-life movement. And I'm just so excited to announce that. Human Coalition is a 10-year-old nonprofit that has been dedicated to serving women and rescuing children in their most dire circumstances and getting them onto a path of stabilizing their circumstances, meeting them where they're at. And they seek out the abortion-seeking woman. And so one of the most underserved populations in our entire country. They meet her needs and have focused on that for 10 years. And in the last 10 years, they've become the largest pro-life organization in the country. And so they're doing an incredible job on the clinic side, really just having a holistic approach, or what they would call the national rescue system, truly believing that in order to end abortion and make it unthinkable and unimaginable and unavailable, they have to have a rescue system in place to do that. And so they've done an incredible job doing that. Well, at the same time, they got to thinking, and I was thinking independently of them, because it's funny how God puts certain missions on both of our hearts. But Planned Parenthood is still the Goliath in the room, and they outpace everyone in terms of funding. And one of the reasons that Planned Parenthood is as successful as they are is because they've been able to get all of the power brokers in their back pockets, the local government, the state government, and the federal government. And through getting funding that way, they are a force to be reckoned with. And Human Coalition realized if we really want to be a competitor for Planned Parenthood, we have to enter the government space, and we have to use policy and connect all of the women and pro-life movement groups that are serving women now with that grassroots with the government. And so I'll be working on that initiative for them. It's called HUCO Action, Human Coalition Action. I am so excited to lead the state effort in Texas over that and start using policy to really get that national rescue system solidified and off the ground. So I could not be more hopeful for the pro-life movement and for unborn children. I could not be more hopeful for really what we're planning to do, which is really be a competitive force and entity against Planned Parenthood.
And one of the reasons when Chelsey was sharing this with me that got me so excited is because, one, the organization that she's joining and going to be able to use her entrepreneurial efforts to really help out. So Human Coalition, for our listeners that aren't aware, is the gold standard when it comes to the pro-life movement, organizations that are not only fighting for life, but creating a culture for life. In that they're doing it there's a graciousness, there's a winsomeness, there's a sense of being data driven, that they're just so strategic and they're so intelligent with the decisions that they're making, not only to be pro women, but also to be pro the life in that womb as well. Mm-hmm. And they're just seeing such measurable impacts and changes for the better, that echo of the kingdom of God. Yeah. And then also the reason why I'm so excited for Chelsey to join this is because Chelsey, and I'm not just saying this because she's right here, and I'm not just saying this because we were just recounting with someone that was telling me that I can't argue with her anymore. Chelsey she is absolutely brilliant. She has a keen ability to be able to see around the corner, and she has a strategic mind that is going to be able to navigate the halls of power in such a way to pair up so brilliantly what's happening on the ground with Human Coalition, with what the actions that can be done in the halls of power and in government and state houses across the country in order to affect change, so that the number of abortions that happen every day, on average upwards of 2,400 abortions are happening every day, can just disappear, and we can have a crazy amount of joy come from seeing babies that are born and lives that are being changed, because mothers and families are beginning, in eternity will be changed. I'm convinced.
I certainly hope so. Like, God willing, that will be the case. I think one of the most compelling things I've heard in my prep recently has been that 75 at Human Coalition, they ask the abortion-seeking women. So these are women who have determined, I want an abortion, and that is their niche woman that they are focused on getting her. And they'll talk to her, and when they ask her, if these circumstances were different, if the domestic abuse, if you had a housing situation, if you had stability, if your circumstances were different, would you want to parent your child? And 75% of these women say yes. She says yes. And to me, that was it's such a powerful thing to know that, because then we can focus on getting her the social workers and the social services she needs, and connecting her with the state organizations and churches that can help her. And once we get that system in place to help her out of her circumstances, A, we save her preborn child, mm-hmm. B, we help her for life, but C, we're creating a genuine solution to this problem. Mm-hmm. And so I could not be more excited, y'all. So I'm grateful to share it. If you want to support us or learn more about us, HUCO Action is so new. We don't have our website ready yet, but go to humancoalition.org. You can either submit a contact or donate and mm-hmm. specify that it's for action and get us off the ground.
That's phenomenal. And so we've got to go to a break. You can find out more information on that, her new organization in Chelsey, at our Facebook page, but we'll be back to talk about that a little bit.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Are single-parent families just as good for children as two-parent families? Some of the headlines recently in newspapers and news magazines seem to say so. But all you have to do is look back at academic studies to see that, in nearly every case, two parents are better than one. One older family study deserves renewed attention. Dr. Patrick Fagan, using data from the National Survey of Children's Health, found two important factors. Children who grow up in an intact family and attend religious services do better than children who do not. There is a significant discrepancy between children who grew up in intact two-parent families and those who came from broken homes. They also found a similar discrepancy between those who attend religious services weekly and those who worship less frequently. They found that children in the former groups were 5 times less likely to repeat a grade, less likely to have behavior problems at home and school, and more likely to be cooperative and understanding of others' feelings. They also found that these differences held true even after controlling for family income and poverty, as well as for the parents' education level, race, and ethnicity. In essence, the study suggests that the best prescription for society is a stable family and family worship. In this environment, children thrive emotionally and achieve academically. You know, in a sense, this study is a flip side of studies that were published years ago about the impact of divorce on children. In my book, Christian Ethics in Plain Language, I talk about the 3 E's of negative impact of divorce. That would be emotional impact, educational impact, and economic impact. So whether you look at these positive studies or the earlier negative studies, you can see the importance of family and worship. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of I gotta
change it.
Human Coalition Action. Is it HUCO Action?
You can say HUCO Action, but it stands for Human Coalition Action.
Okay. HUCO Action.
Whatever you prefer, Nick. Whatever's going to make you stop making that noise at me right now. Just kidding.
Can we run it back? You want to run it back?
Yeah, go ahead, start.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of HUCO Action and David Fraga, who also has equally big news as well. So, David, share us a little bit about your big news that you've been keeping under wraps and now is no longer under embargo.
It's not under wraps anymore, I guess. But today is my first day at Gateway staff. So it's Gateway Church, and it's an amazing opportunity. I'm just so grateful that they're giving me that chance in order to be able to help them out in some administrative work in adult ministry specifically. And my heart is in the area of helping young men in order to be kingdom men, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so I'm learning that. I love just being able to be a part of that. And it's such an amazing opportunity to just serve, help out, and also for me to be equipped and for me to have access to amazing resources, to an amazing church that has grown me a lot over the past year and a half, almost 2 years now. So I started today, and that's one of an amazing opportunity. And also with my other organization, Kingdom Initiative. And so we're just a media network that uses media to build the kingdom. And it's awesome because we're able to help equip people who are doing podcasting, who make videos, who do photography, who do graphic design work, website work, and we just equip them. All we're doing is giving them the first essential steps in order to move in the same direction to affect the next generation. That's all it is. So we're just giving them a platform and network to get them connected in different cities, and also an ability to help fund certain things for them to be equipped in, whether it's equipment, whether it's being discipled, whether it's having a coach to help consult them in some areas.
That's phenomenal. And so everybody's got all this news. And so David's started this new venture. Chelsey is going to just as we said, millennials say, crush it at Huco Action. And here I am. I've got news. I ate sushi for lunch today.
You make good choices.
It was kind of a healthier choice. It was to combat kind of what I actually had for breakfast, but nevertheless. And so, Chelsey, I want to circle back because we rushed it toward the end, and because I think that what you're doing is kind of pertinent to some of what our audience has been listening in on and what they're interested in. And so give us a little bit more, elaborate, because you're going to be working from a public policy standpoint as best we can. And that's where, and this is why I think it's so pivotal, is because some of the great work that's being done right now relative to the pro-life movement has been happening in state houses across the country to help see that 2,400 every day abortion is committed every day here in the U.S. It's precipitously gone down over the past 3 to 5 years, largely because of what's happening in the state houses. So share a little bit more about what you'll be doing that.
Sure. So, just a little bit of background information. One of the reasons I'm so hopeful about the pro-life movement is because truly we are the most pro-life culturally, according to polls, that we've ever been since Roe versus Wade. So the millennials are pro-life. And because of that, we know politics and law is always downstream of culture. And we are starting to see that thanks to President Trump. We have so many pro-life judges that we have never had before, ever, in the makeup of the judicial system, which means that states can pass pro-life measures with more likelihood they'll be upheld. So really, our judiciary has been such a sticking point. And I hope I'm not boring everybody, but, we now more than ever, have the opportunity to really have strong pro-life measures passed and withstand constitutional muster, and we have more medical information about the preborn child than ever before. And all of that has culminated after 46 years since Roe versus Wade into what I think is a real sea change in the pro-life movement. And we've had people who've been in this movement for decades fighting this good fight, and they should be so excited now more than ever that we're going to see that change happen. So what's happened in a few of the other states, we've talked on the show about Alabama, and Mississippi and Georgia, they've passed the 6-week heartbeat bill, which is if you can detect a heartbeat at 6 weeks, that preborn child cannot be aborted. And we are going to see in the next few years what the courts do with that and how far they're willing to go, especially if the Supreme Court, with the makeup we have now, we're not sure which way they'll really go. I'm pretty hopeful about them. I'd love, on the pro-life side to have one more Trump appointee to really solidify. But at the end of the day, we're going to know more what the courts are willing to uphold and hopefully see some changes. And the state of Texas is passed some great measures. They permanently defunded Planned Parenthood, passed great counseling bills and a non-discrimination bill. So there's been a lot of good work nationwide at the state level. And of course, Huco Action will have we're going to be a national lobbying entity. So we have an executive director based in DC. I would hope for the feds to do something about this issue. I don't know if we'll see that, but I think that this is a really exciting time to pay attention and really lean in and support the pro-life movement.
Yeah, this what I'm always captivated by is just kind of the idea that's just been kind of ingrained in the U.S. experiment was that it being the U.S. experiment, the states being these little incubators. And what you're doing at Huco Action really is allowing it to be, what are some of those experiments that we can do within the states to hopefully we can scope and scale out. And Texas has always been one of the states from a pro-life standpoint that's leading the charge. And what can we do to necessarily to bring down that number?
Right. And one important thing I think that should be noted is the day that, let's say, the 6-week heartbeat bill goes to the Supreme Court, if the Supreme Court decided tomorrow that is a really viable measure, that those preborn children at 6 weeks should be protected because they have a heartbeat, and the states need to have their what we call trigger laws in place. So the day Roe versus Wade is overturned, the rest of the states still have to have laws on the books that say, okay, now abortion is no longer it's unthinkable and unavailable in our state. We have to have those laws already on the books. They're called trigger bills. And I think nationwide that's something that we should really be pushing for.
Yeah, because that you bring up a great point, because sometimes I think the misconception is that once Roe v. Wade gets overturned, then it just kind of, abortion is illegal.
No, it just goes back to your state. And so whatever your state has on the books is what you're working with. And I think we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, and I think that's why investing in and coming alongside and supporting entities like Huco Action are so important, because these are the type of organizations that are going to be putting into place the policies and procedures in the state level at the state houses that can be replicated across the U.S. So we've got to think strategically, not simply just moving all troops forward to make sure that we can get enough justices to overturn Roe v. Wade, but what happens after Roe v. Wade. And then all the while, which is why I love Human Coalition. I feel like I should get a stipend for this. Why I love Human Coalition is because they're not just simply doing the necessary work to be able to eradicate abortion, but they're doing the beautiful work of creating cultures of life that allow women to come alongside women and to be pro-women in this as well. And so it's not simply trying to force a decision down anyone's throat, but rather it's an opportunity to come alongside them and to help women know that they can do this. Like we are a better society when children are present. We are a better society when both women and men know that they have the capacity and wherewithal not only to be able to make their way through this world, but to contribute to this world in order that they might add to the viability and the joy found in living in this good gift that God has given to us. And so it just encourages me. And so we're going to take a break, but when we come back from the break, we are going to talk a little bit about, in a shocking twist, President Trump's tweets have generated a little bit of controversy. So we will jump to some of the tweets that have generated that controversy, and some are saying that his tweets were racist, others are saying they're xenophobic. And so we'll be listening, and we'll kind of discuss that, as well as we'll be taking some of your calls as well after the break, when we talk about President Trump and his recent tweets that started on Sunday and have not stopped, I don't think, since. And so we'll be talking a little bit about that. And then we'll also be talking a little bit about some of the new immigration measures that have been put into place by the president and what that does relative to the ongoing crisis at the border as well. But if you'd like to find out more information on Chelsey's new endeavor, you can go on over to the Facebook page at facebook.com/pointofviewradio. Underneath the live video box, you'll be able to see we've posted a link to some of her new endeavor that she's a part of. So you can go there, you can sign up to get the newsletter, you can sign up to financially support that as well. Just make sure, if you do financially support, you get a little note that says action to make sure that it goes towards her and that new part of Human Coalition. So when you support her, make sure that you put a note, action, that it will go towards her. But nevertheless, we have got to take a break right now. But when we come back, we're going to actually talk about this thing called Twitter and President Trump's Twitter and the problems that it has spun out right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of the Human Coalition Action, HUCO Action, as well as David Fraga of Gateway Dallas. And we have been talking about President Trump. And specifically, we're going to start opening up the phone lines for some of his tweets that he was criticized for on Sunday that he started to send out, that some are saying are racist, others are saying are xenophobic. And I'll be really interested to hear what you all have to say about these tweets that came back. And so, according to news reports, President Trump was criticized after he posted tweets his opponents have derided as xenophobic and racist, calling for an unspecified group of congresswomen to, quote, go back to the countries they originally came from before trying to make legislative changes in the United States. And so, to quote President Trump in his tweets, he said, quote, so interesting to see that progressive Democratic congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt, and inept anywhere in the world, if they even have a functioning government at all, now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came, then come back to us and show us how it's done? Some are assuming, because, again, he did not specify specifically who those tweets were, that he was referencing what is known as the 4 liberal freshman congresswomen known as the Squad. So this is Representative Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Omar, Representative Presley, and Representative Tlaib as well. And so, Chelsey, when you heard news of President Trump and these tweets, your response?
Nick, when you heard about Trump and these tweets, what was your response?
Oh, no. I asked the question first.
Okay,
I can tell you. I'll tell you eventually.
My first response actually was to go look at the source and what the tweets were, because, to be fair, you sent me the CNN article, and I read the CNN article and literally thought it was an op-ed. There was so much narrative around it, I couldn't figure out what was actually said or not.
Okay.
So then I went and I looked at the source, and course, I thought that what he said was completely inappropriate and offensive. First of all, these women are American, so there's no country to go back to other than the one they live in. And regardless of our policy differences, we all aspire to make our country stronger. Now, some of us do that in really misguided and terrible ways. So we could say that this progressive bloc is not going to be effective at helping America, but hurt America. But that's a different argument than what I perceive the racist ones he made were. Since that time, there were a lot of tweets to read, so it took me some time.
I know he went on a tear.
He's doing what I would call the famous Trump "I screwed up" acknowledgement, which is reframing, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
And so now what he's tweeting is, I think, what he characterizes as like what he truly meant, which was, if you don't like America, leave.
Right.
And of course, that's also pejorative. But it's definitely a reframe from go back to the country you came from. I think it's all terrible. It's all immature. And I think he has actually a political motive. Frankly, he does everything with, to me, a political agenda. And to me, his political motive is the Democrats, particularly in the House. There's been a lot of infighting in the last few weeks. I'm sure the show has mentioned that or talked about it to a certain extent. So the Pelosi brand, more establishment brand of Democrats, and this very, very, very progressive socialist bloc of Democrats have been going at it. And I think that Trump views them going at it as problematic for the Republicans, because he wants the Democrats to look as crazy left-wing socialist as possible. So he has an interest, and tweeted as much, in the Democrats aligning with this progressive bloc. And so what he said drives them back together. It makes all of the Democrats come together against him. And I think that that's where he feels most comfortable. Now, that's a political strategy, and that's not really a moral statement about what was said, but I think it's worth noting.
I think you make a great distinction relative to the political calculus behind it,
right?
That what he's done, but then the moral sentiment.
And in case
as well.
I wasn't clear enough, it was wrong.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's like, in case
Overall,
somehow this is going to come back and bite me in 20 years, like it was wrong. Okay,
there it is.
Continue.
Okay, so David, your thoughts?
Yeah, it definitely could have been handled much better, but it just seemed like it was just a quick reaction because he wasn't getting what he wanted at that just at that moment. And so what I do see with this is that it does seem like he's trying to make this squad that is so famously known as maybe the face of that party, per se, the Democratic Party, in order to maybe show them like, hey, this is what is happening, but in order to advance his own political agenda. And so, yeah, I don't agree with the way he went about it at all either, but I do see how he was trying to make a point. It almost seems like that he just really didn't. I don't know if he thought about the repercussions that would come off of it, or maybe he did and wanted it. So,
well, I think that I'm frustrated because aside from the fact that this, like, now he conceded the moral ground on this issue, right. And let's be frank, like, these women's their history and the way they speak about our nation and country. It speaks for itself. Like, right. We don't have to portray them in a certain light at all. Like, we don't have to address them. Like, the country will decide what they think about everyone's opinions on Election Day. And I think what he did was instead of allowing them to make the horrible comments, anti-American comments that they make, now we're talking about the Republicans being xenophobic and racist again. Yeah. And it's not it's not a fair representation of our party. It's not a fair representation of any evangelical I know or conservative I know. And I think it just plays straight into the left's narrative about us.
Yeah, one of the things that's frustrating is it seems as though, so Jonathan Swan over at Axios gave two great anecdotes on Sunday in his Sunday Scoop newsletter. And what he found is that it's just increasingly difficult to voice dissent against President Trump. And so he pointed to two examples of Diane Black as well as another individual that was a representative. But what I wanted to do, though, is I want to open up the conversation to what you think relative to what you think about President Trump's tweets about telling individuals to go back to their home countries. We welcome your thoughts, and you can do so at 800-351-1212. Again, 800-351-1212. Or you can go over to Facebook, facebook.com/pointofviewradio. We'd love to hear your comments as well. We're going to take one phone call right now. We've got Anthony that's in D.C., but from Idaho right now. Anthony, you there?
Yes, I am. I'm a White House journalist and a Christian journalist, and I was there last week when these tweet comments came out. And I want to make the point about those tweets, and I would agree with you that things could have been said differently, but I think President Trump is just speaking to the issue of that these Congress people are actually representing a socialist country view. President Trump has been critical of the Democratic Party being socialist, if not communist. And these congressmen, women exemplify a worldview in opposition to our Constitution. They do represent other socialist country views, even though they was pointed out that they all did not. Actually, only one was not born here.
Yeah, I think
when you're born.
You're bringing up
the other three were born here, but I agree that with the frustration about that's been raised in concerning the Democrat Party being more socialist, and we've got a serious problem at hand. And I think the importance of reporting the truth at the White House. I'm in the midst of these fake news, and they're spinning a lot and really not getting the point. It really is that socialist agenda.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would be interested in, though, is just because I think it's two separate claims. There's one claim that says go back to your home countries, and then there's another thing that he's been reiterating as of late, which is you can leave. And I think those are. Would you agree that those are two separate claims?
They're two separate claims, and I was there at a press conference when he made it clear to everyone that they can leave. That is the reality, is that people have the freedom to leave who they want. And we should have the right, though, to complain about what's going on and try to do something about it. But it seems like the Democratic Party is just trying to change the Constitution. If they want us to be a socialist country, they should leave. They can go join another socialist country. But our country wasn't formed as a socialist country. And the founding fathers made it clear about our freedoms and the right that we have of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness.
Yeah. Well, Anthony, we've got to take a break, but thank you so much for calling in. But when we come back, we're going to continue taking some of your phone calls as to what you think of President Trump's tweets. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jeremy Morris likes to decorate for Christmas. Actually, that's underselling it by quite a bit. Jeremy Morris and his wife Christy decorate nearly every inch of their home with Christmas lights. The display in northern Idaho became such a hit at Christmas time, they decided to make it a community event. When folks would stop by to see the display, they would invite them onto their driveway for hot chocolate, a picture with Santa, and even an opportunity to share with them the biblical story of Christmas. When the Morrises decided to move into a new neighborhood, they looked at the Homeowners Association's covenants and didn't see any problem with the display. Still, wanting to be good neighbors, they gave the HOA a heads up. And that's when things took a turn. The HOA explained in a letter that some of our residents are non-Christians or of another faith, noting that they were concerned for the, quote, problems that could bring up, unquote. So on the basis of religion, they told them they could not decorate their house at Christmas, even though houses in the neighborhood are decorated for Halloween. So Jeremy filed a lawsuit, and a jury determined that the HOA violated the Fair Housing Act, engaging in religious discrimination. But soon after, a federal judge overruled the jury's verdict. First Liberty has taken on the appeal, hoping to restore the jury's verdict. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Let me ask you, what if America's best attorneys from the very top law firms got together to defend religious freedom in court? That's exactly what's happening at First Liberty. And the best news? We're winning over 90% of our legal actions. Come learn more at firstliberty.org. You'll be encouraged. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, joined by Chelsey Youman of Huco Action, as well as David Fraga of Gateway Dallas. We have been talking about President Trump's tweets, just like I think about the rest of I don't want to say the rest of the country, because I think a large part of the U.S. doesn't know what's actually happening right now. No one's really checked into what's happening on the day-to-day, but I think there is a large contingent that's wondering what to make of President Trump's tweets that he sent out over the weekend on Sunday morning, rather, when he said, quote, we're telling certain Democratic congresswomen to, quote, go back to the countries he says they, quote, originally came from before trying to make legislative changes here in the U.S. And so we've been taking a couple of your phone calls right now as to what you think of those tweets. And so we will continue to do so. And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. What do you make of President Trump's tweets of telling the certain progressive Democratic congresswomen to go back to the country that they came from and then come back and show us how it's done? So we're going to jump over to Pete in Texas right now. Pete, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Hey, Pete, what's your point of view?
Well, I think Merle Haggard, many years ago, in the song he wrote, he said, if you don't love it, leave it.
Mm.
And I think what Trump is trying to do is he's just trying to make America now in the spotlight. Everybody's talking about it. Separate him from those people that are going off to the left, the progressive, the socialist, communists. And I think he's bringing it up. And because the mass media won't talk about it, I think he's making it news, for majority of people to kind of look and take another look at the Democratic Party.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things, Pete. Because again, like I love Merle Haggard. I'm no Okie from Muskogee, but I do appreciate him. That is for sure. The second, I think those are two distinct claims to make. Wouldn't you agree? So wouldn't you agree that one, if you don't love it, you can leave it, and then the other claim that he made to say if you don't love it, you can go back to the country that you're from, which appears to be. Go ahead.
Well, I think what he's trying to say was the same thing. I mean, he's trying to say that, hey, if you're here in America, love America.
Yeah.
Be American. Don't call yourself, all these hyphenated names that you put on them and then say America,
Yeah.
I'm an American, period, and I think a lot of people are resonating with that, I mean, the idea that people are rejecting the flag and burning the flag here in the United States and stuff like that just shows that, we need to get back to the roots of the Constitution of the United States of America.
Yeah. Well, Pete, thank you so much for your phone call. I greatly appreciate it. And I appreciate a little Okie from Muskogee reference.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, and Pete brings up a really interesting point, and maybe we'll go around the roundtable really quickly. What you think? Because I think is there that sense? I do wonder, what is the role of disagreement in the American experiment now? Right? Are there certain issues that we have to be lockstep in now? Or are there certain policies that it's okay for us to disagree with, to debate on, and at the end of the day, the system that we have set up, a democratic republic, we can allow elected officials to be able to represent us, in turn debate these issues contestedly, and then whoever the majority wins. David, what's your thoughts on that? What's the role of disagreement here in the U.S.?
I think one of the biggest fears right now is when we disagree with certain things that we don't want to offend someone.
Mm-hmm.
And so communicating that, especially someone who comes from a different culture, different background, we have to be, we attempt to be passive in terms of how we communicate it, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of like, hey, I don't want to offend anyone, but could you maybe not do this or do that? And I think that's a big issue, because then we're not able to actually address some maybe some difficult problems here.
Yeah, I think one of the things. So, Chelsey, I'm really interested in your opinion on this, because I think I can't think of any examples off the top of my head that we can say that you have to be in agreement on. But here's what I do know. I want to believe it to be true that America.
The Bible.
From a political standpoint. And Thomas Jefferson would probably have something else to say. But nevertheless, so I want to believe it to be true that in our system that one person, one vote. You have an opportunity to put forward your idea out there in our system of government, and it might be ludicrous, it might be completely sound, but you have an opportunity to be heard. Or do we have to live in a system that you have to be lock in step with the status quo, the vox populi? What's the role of disagreement here in the U.S.? Because in this instance, it seems as though if you disagree with the president, then you just need to get out.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out where you're getting at this, but I think you just hit it on the head.
Okay.
Your point being maybe you could help me get there by what's
yeah,
your
so should some go back, or do we all move forward together, disagreements and all?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I kept thinking like on party lines. Look, I think that I truly value a robust intellectual debate, and I think actually most Americans do. I think Americans are intelligent. I think they're logical, and I think they care about truth and facts. And I think that because of the system we live in a democracy, we're only ever going to have two parties to choose from. And so it naturally kind of puts you in one of two camps. And so while I might have a lot of nuances in my policy beliefs and ideologies, I'm still going to have one person who may or not represent that me well to choose from in my party. And so for me, I think we're a robust country. We have lots of room for debate and policy. That's what the primary is all about. This sentiment that either get on board or get out. I really think at the heart of it is what kind of our callers have been saying, which is to want to fundamentally change democracy and the beautiful system we have in place here in our country. That's a real threat to our stability as a country. And so if that's what's being said, that's a different question. Now, I think that the comment was not that. I think that the comment struck at something much different. But, people really care about the democracy we have in our Constitution, myself included.
And
that's okay. I don't want a socialist regime in our country, and I can say that.
And I think that's a beautiful part. That's what I think is the robustness and the strength of us is in our disagreements, right? I want to believe it to be true. So Niebuhr would say, in the Democratic in politics is finding proximate solutions to impossible problems. It's what Hamilton said, or not Hamilton, but Madison said in the Federalist Papers: ambition counteracting ambition. It's those disagreements that really do make us stronger and limit the form of government as well.
Well, a lot of times I've noticed the political discourse feels like shots in the dark, just a bunch of theories, this could work or that could work, tax reform. But the truth is we have very tangible evidence for what policies work and don't work. Let's look at the states. Don't forget
the incubators.
This is a federal system. And so we've got California, which has vastly different policies as an experimental process than Texas. And we're seeing how those policies pan out. And so I can look at certain states and say, this does not work, or this appears to be working. And, I think our federal policy should logically follow suit.
Yeah. So we got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to continue talking about President Trump's tweets. I'll be interested to know one or two questions from our listeners. One, what do you think of President Trump's tweets on Sunday morning? If you don't agree, you can go back to your home countries and get out. And then two, what is the role of disagreement here in the U.S.? And so you can call in at 800-351-1212. Again, that number is 800-351-1212. When we come back, more about President Trump's tweets. And so we will be back, though, right after this.
So you sit down and do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs and your bills and your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. That is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. And when it comes to healthcare sharing ministries, MediShare is really the gold standard. It's been around for 25 years and has more than 400,000 members. It's been around so long and grown so much because it works. And whether you're single or married or have kids, this could make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. $500 a month can more than cover a car payment or pay back loans, whatever. So join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Here's the number to call. They are incredibly kind and helpful to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team. Pointofview.net/team. Or 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now,
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. So grateful that you have decided to join us today. I'm joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of Huco Action. It's growing on me. I was a little bit more trepidatious. There's more hesitation in that one.
Yeah, but
in the
you
first
also
hour.
said Huco. It's Human Coalition Action. Huco Action.
Well, then you don't want me, but you don't want me emphasizing Huco because you called me out for that.
Okay.
So what we're doing though is I'm trying to repetition is the greatest teacher, right? And so right now I am trying to repeat it multiple times so that our audience knows that you are at a new organization, is what
That's
Chelsey
right.
announced during the first hour of the program. And so she has got huge news that she's going to share with you. And I've also got huge news that I'll share afterwards. And so Chelsey, because I'm a gentleman, I'll let you go first with your huge news.
Yes, I'm so excited. It's been a while in the works to announce to all of you listeners that I am now with Human Coalition Action. And Human Coalition is the underlying nonprofit, and they are in the pro-life space. Their mission and goal is to make a national rescue system for children. And so how they do that is reaching women who are determined to have an abortion and helping them out of their circumstances, stabilizing those circumstances, and really enabling and empowering them to choose to keep their preborn child. And so it's beautiful work that they're doing nationwide in the last 10 years. They've really grown to be the largest pro-life organization in the entire country. But they started looking around and realizing that really there is no contender for the Goliath in the room, which is Planned Parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
Planned Parenthood is so successful, not because there are a bunch of women's clinics, but because they have local, city, state, and federal government dollars in their back pockets, funneling to them to make them really on the policy side successful. And so Human Coalition realized that that's a huge need in the pro-life movement that we have to be able to contend with Planned Parenthood and really be a competitor with them is for us to get on the policy side. And so I'm really excited and honored that they are asking me to be their Texas State Director and start working on policies from the grassroots that's going to really enable the pro-life movement and empower them to be able to continue to serve women so well and just expand that national rescue system for children.
And what I think is so rich is that Chelsey is moving from one esteemed organization, First Liberty, that everyone knows oh so well, that's fighting for First Amendment and religious liberty, to now another esteemed organization with Human Coalition that continues in that First Amendment vein of fighting for the right for life.
Mm-hmm.
And what not a better organization, just really the gold standard organization, and Chelsey's brilliance and her strategic mind to be able to be the entrepreneurial asset that really allows a Human Coalition to figure out what does it look like from a state standpoint to begin to make public policy moves in such a way that rescues the hundreds and upwards of 2,400 children that are aborted every day. Because on the front lines, a Human Coalition just has done a phenomenal job providing for women in their time of need. But now, how do you create systems and structures in place to be able to do that? And that's where you're set up to do so well.
Yes, I'm so excited. I mean, I know I've said this before on the show, but the truth is that our generation and really the entire country is more pro-life than we've ever been. We're more pro-life ever since Roe versus Wade. And that's because of so many things, but our hearts and minds are changing on this issue. Well, what's downstream of our culture on this and our hearts on this is politics and policy. And so it's really important to capitalize on this moment. I am so hopeful for this moment in our country. I really believe that the stain of abortion is about to be removed from our country. And I think that there has to be hope in that and a system in place to help enable women to keep their preborn children and to make them successful to do that. So we have to have policies on the books, we have to have funding from the states and federal governments, but also we have to really just use the systems that are in place to make that a possibility. And now with the makeup of the courts, I have to give President Trump the kudos for that. The nominees he's appointing are the right ones for this time. And so there's so much to look forward to. I'm so excited and obviously passionate about this issue and to really dive into this. And if you also care about this issue and you want to know how to support, go to humancoalition.org and you can either donate there. This is a brand new initiative, so we're still very much up in the works on the systems side and could definitely use your support. And then just specify you're interested in HUCO Action or Human Coalition Action.
That's phenomenal. And so if you're listening on Facebook right now, or if you're a listener that wants to jump onto Facebook to find out ways to be able to support Chelsey and the great work that she's doing at Human Coalition Action, you can go to the Facebook page. And if you're looking at me right now, I need you to go right underneath that. And there's going to be a link there at the Facebook page. And on the Facebook page, you're going to see the link to the Human Coalition website. And at humancoalition.org, you're going to be able to go to that website and you're going to be able to have an opportunity to either support financially or to keep up with Chelsey, because this is such a new initiative that the website isn't even up for this thing yet. But the work has already started, and you have an opportunity to join in that work on the ground floor. And so your support is needed. So if you could sign up for an email newsletter that will be going out to keep up with the email updates, you can do so at that website, or you can support financially as well. And so, but here's the kicker though, and this is an important part. When you sign up financially, you need to put in the memo or in the note, action. That's right. Action is going to be able to designate those funds for her work in public policy world to make sure that children are protected, not only outside the womb, but inside the womb as well. And so help Chelsey out, that this trusted voice that we have known for so long. And so Chelsey, thanks so much for all the work that you're doing. And we want to continue to point efforts towards that. And so we're going to continue the conversation for one more segment relative to President Trump and his tweets telling individuals. During the first hour, we were talking about those problematic tweets that went out of saying that if you disagree, you can get out, go back to your home countries, and then come back again and show us how it's done. There's been some individuals that have expressed disagreement. We're going to take one more phone call on this before we switch gears. And so let's go to Raymond in New Mexico right now. Raymond, are you there?
Hello.
Hey, Raymond, what's your point of view?
Well, there's a lot of garbage coming down the pike, and kids got to learn how to discern what's right and what's not. And this thing about the homosexual and transvestite, this going awry in the States, and they try to put a guilt trip on you and say, well, you're not tolerant. The thing of it is, when you give in to this misnomer of being tolerant, for myself, I am an American. I'm a patriot to the Constitution. When somebody comes in and tries to undermine it and try to put a guilt trip on me because I'm not tolerant, when we succumb to that, we're going to be in bad trouble as far as a Christian nation.
Yeah, Raymond, thank you so much for your phone call. Greatly appreciate some of those comments, but we have got to go to a break right now. But when we come back from the break, we're going to switch gears a little bit. There's interesting at the famous church here in the U.S., Riverside Church, has got some controversy right now relative to their new pastor, or rather their former pastor now. But we've got to take a break, and we'll be back right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Are single-parent families just as good for children as two-parent families? Some of the headlines recently in newspapers and news magazines seem to say so. But all you have to do is look back at academic studies to see that, in nearly every case, two parents are better than one. One older family study deserves renewed attention. Dr. Patrick Fagan, using data from the National Survey of Children's Health, found two important factors. Children who grow up in an intact family and attend religious services do better than children who do not. There is a significant discrepancy between children who grew up in intact two-parent families and those who came from broken homes. They also found a similar discrepancy between those who attend religious services weekly and those who worship less frequently. They found that children in the former groups were 5 times less likely to repeat a grade, less likely to have behavior problems at home and school, and more likely to be cooperative and understanding of others' feelings. They also found that these differences held true even after controlling for family income and poverty, as well as for the parents' education level, race, and ethnicity. In essence, the study suggests that the best prescription for society is a stable family and family worship. In this environment, children thrive emotionally and achieve academically. You know, in a sense, the study is a flip side of studies that were published years ago about the impact of divorce on children. In my book, Christian Ethics in Plain Language, I talk about the 3 E's of negative impact of divorce. That would be emotional impact, educational impact, and economic impact. So whether you look at these positive studies or the earlier negative studies, you can see the importance of family and worship. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For a free copy of Kirby's booklet, A Biblical View on Anti-Semitism, go to viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism. Viewpoints.info/anti-Semitism.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. We have been talking about immigration. We're going to switch, or not immigration, rather. We've been talking about President Trump's tweets. Just to get a wide breadth of the show of what we've had today, we started off talking about the immigration issue. New action was put out by the Trump administration earlier yesterday relative to asylum and who can't grant asylum, and really trying to help kind of alleviate some of the crisis that's happening at the border right now. We transitioned away from the immigration issue to talk about what's happening on President Trump's Twitter, some of the comments that he made, and now we're going to jump over to what has just been, it's just such an interesting turn of events at a very historic church. And so you have Riverside Church congregants are calling for the reinstatement of the first female minister after her exit following a adult toy store visit. And so this is out of the Washington Post of all places. So follow along with me. A group of congregants at Riverside Church, which Power of Positive Thinking, this is a very prominent church within mainline Christianity. Riverside Church is calling on the historic Manhattan pulpit to reinstate its first female minister days after the church did not renew Amy Butler's contract following a visit she took to an adult toy store with church employees and congregants. Butler and others were in Minnesota for a conference when, during the break, Butler and her congregant proposed visiting this adult store, which labels itself, I'm not even going to say it, and now they spent about a half an hour in the shop, and for some strange reason, she went in, she purchased stuff with these fellow church. It's just it's fascinating. And here's the conversation that I'd like to have around this. In the biblical narrative, the office of the overseer, according to Reverend Butler's position in this instance, requires someone that is above reproach. We know that from 1 Timothy 3:2 and Titus 1:6-7. This person must have a good reputation outside the church and a blameless character inside the church, according to 1 Timothy 3:7 and then Colossians 1:22. So should a minister lead her church after she led some church members to an adult store? Here's some of the problematic things that I'm beginning to see or serve as the kindling to this. That 47% of families in the U.S. report that pornography is a problem in their home. 79% of men between the ages of 18 and 30 view pornography at least monthly. That number is 67% for men between the ages of 31 to 49. And regarding men between the ages of 50 to 65, that number is 50%. In the land of the free, Butler has the liberty to frequent such a shop. But in the home of the holy, she shouldn't exercise her liberty in this way, especially with church members. And Chelsey, I think one of the vantage points that you bring to this, among a variety that you bring to this, is the fact that you're raising up two men in your household. And I just want to know, like, how are you beginning to think through, how are you going to navigate through
Okay. They're toddlers, so I don't have a playbook right now. We're working on like potty training.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're right. I think that's kind of a separate issue to some extent than this issue. But yeah, it's terrifying to raise young boys and hopefully godly men in the current culture and environment we have that's over-sexualized and trying to appeal that inappropriate culture to younger and younger generations. I mean, we even here locally in Dallas have had multiple drag queen library hours, story hours for kids starting at like infancy.
Yeah.
I mean, is invited to the event. And, you know, it's wild to me, the level of innocence I'm going to have to try to like keep my boys in for as long as God willing possible because of the culture we're in. So yeah, it is terrifying. And something that I hope that, you know, through biblical principles and counsel in the village we live in, not an actual village, but the metaphorical village it takes to raise.
But I think that brings up a great point, though, and I want you to tease out that comment because I really do think that I know Chelsea's a part of a phenomenal church, and one of the hallmarks of her church is they create such rich communities, and it isn't just trying to keep them away; it's trying to allure them with something. And I think that's one of the hallmarks of your church, and especially what you do. Like what y'all do in your home, like this rich community of replacing it with a better model than what the world is presenting. Right.
And, you know, this isn't the first time historically that, you know, you think back to the Hellenistic age. I mean, there were a lot of things cultures have had to deal with before. But I mean, our goal is to just preach truth to our kids at a young age so that like the Lord is in their hearts and the Holy Spirit convicts them. And then also be very wise and discerning in where we allow them to go and spend their time and what they're allowed to do, especially on the tech side. I mean, you know, I heard a really great, maybe he was on the show even. I think he was an author on the show saying, you know, you're not going to give a 9-year-old a car, right? So until your child shows a level of maturity and responsibility to be able to handle certain levels of technology and access to the internet, and even then there needs to be boundaries, like, you don't just hand them a phone at 8 and say good luck. And I think that trying to mitigate what we've seen happen in society is the best we can do. And we're not going to get it perfect or right, but we'll use your prayers. So anyone out there want to be praying for the Youman boys in my house, we're going to do the best we can. But it's a difficult culture. And, you know, when I found out I was having boys, I thought I was just going to have all girls because I have all girls in my family. I never imagined boys. I was overwhelmed, not because everyone's like, boys are crazy, which they are crazy, by the way. I feel such a sense of responsibility to make them men and leaders in a world that is godless and a culture that is much more backwards than it was for me 20 years ago. Whereas, you know, it's just going to be a different challenge. I don't have the answers.
Yeah, I think there's 2 points that I think are really interesting that you bring up that I'm been doing a little bit of research on, trying to figure it out. Is one, there is the understanding the world in which we live. Like, so you're the men of Issachar, that you understand the times in which you're living, according to First Chronicles 12:32. this understanding that we're living in a world in which, for some individual, it's one thing it's one thing to exercise your liberty in such a way as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ to go and use your liberty to go to such a shop. It's one thing. It's another thing for you to use your liberty to lead others from your church to go to such a store. That's another thing. The third level that I just find so preposterous that reveals the temperature of the culture that we're living in is that you have church members now that are advocating for you and trying to justify this behavior. So that I think that reveals the temperature of the culture that we're living in right now.
Yeah, I don't actually know much about this church or their denomination. I go to a church that they preach a really hard truth from the pulpit, and they don't shy away from hard issues, and that includes on human sexuality and the life issue. And so I know that there are a lot of watered down churches out there, and there are a lot of churches that aren't taking hardline stances and aren't discipling their congregations in those ways. But ultimately, I'm going to land on my legal side. Usually that's most where I'm comfortable, but ultimately it's well within the church's rights to make their own doctrine, have their own standards for who leads their church and ministry, and decide, what characteristics and traits they feel like are most important. So it's really within their right to decide who's going to shepherd their flock.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
the flock doesn't get to choose the shepherd all the time. The churches aren't as democratic necessarily as our government, right?
So true. And that's largely based on their own ecclesiology of the way in which the church is structured. And then the second part, though, is the modeling component. Like, I think that's a key part that you have hit on, this idea of I want to be able to model what it looks like to be a leader. I want to be able to model what it looks like to be self-controlled. I want to be able to model what it looks like to be pure in a very impure age. And I think our world is desperately looking for individuals to model ideals that we have only heard about and have yet to see. And I think that, I know we give a lot of attention right now to politics. I mean, we spent the entirety of this show talking about political matters. And I think politics has a place, but as Christians, I know politics doesn't occupy the central place in any of our lives. And I think that the centrality of our lives should be rooted in the person and work of Jesus Christ. Not only his life, but his death and his resurrection. And the opportunity that we have to be like Paul, to attempt to, live a life so that we might be able to echo what Paul said later on in his life, to imitate me as I imitate Christ Jesus, to be that model in this very broken world. But we have got to take a break. But when we come back from the break, we are going to talk about a little bit about the role and the need for taking risks in society. So I've been away on vacation for a little bit, and I've read a lot about risk. So I can't wait to talk a little bit about the role of risk in life and how we're becoming increasingly averse to risk, but the benefit of risk. And I can't wait to question Chelsey and all of the risks that she has taken and her role on risk, especially now as a mother of two. But we've got to take a break, but we'll be back right after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @PointOfViewRTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is
Nick Pitts.
And welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts, joined at the Millennial Roundtable by Chelsey Youman of the Huco Action. I'm going to get it.
You're never going to get it.
Well, okay.
It's like your sixth chance to try. I'm with Human Coalition Action now, and I want the audience to know that.
Because apparently I'm not conveying the message well enough. But what else is new? I was mispronouncing your last name for how long? Way too long. But nevertheless, we're switching gears right now. Background story, I have just been captivated by risk as of late. That was largely what I wanted to spend some time over the past 10 days reading about and thinking about. And not only did I want to read about it and think about it, but I also wanted to be about it as well. Hence the reason why I went to go run with the bulls in Pamplona. And I will tell you that in Spain, they have a zest for life unlike any other place that I've ever seen in my life. There is a sense of just wanting to squeeze out every day and understand that it is nothing but a gift, and they want to love well. They want to enjoy. Their life is too short to not enjoy a long meal. And it was just such a refreshing time to think about, as well as realizing that people run really fast when there are bulls chasing behind them, as you might expect. But the reason why risk really got onto me, that really began to get on my radar more, was a study that I came across, and I want to share it with you all. There was a study that was put out, and a social scientist decided that he wanted to send out a survey all across the U.S. and was going to ask individuals if they were faced a significant decision. They didn't care which way they went, either said yes and took the risk, or no and stuck to the status quo, and they would be willing to allow a computer to flip a coin to be able to decide which way to go. And so a significant decision being anything from a move to a job change to asking someone to marry them, a significant decision, paralyzed by that decision, and wouldn't mind a computer flipping a coin so that they could choose heads, yes, take the risk, tails, no, don't take the risk, stick to the status quo. And what they found is that 26,000 people decided that, yes, I'm facing a significant decision. I don't care. I have no preference towards yes or no, and I'm paralyzed in this moment, and I'm willing to accept whatever decision that the computer reaches relative to the heads or tails. And what the social scientists found is that after giving them the marching orders, take the risk, stick to the status quo, they found 6 months later that individuals, regardless of outcome, were happier that took risks than didn't take the risk. And then what he began to surmise and kind of expound upon from that, looking at some other data points, is that we're just increasingly less averse to risk here in the U.S. right now. There's a lot of attributes we could point to for that. We can talk about how we're living in a world today in which no longer are there helicopter parents, but they're snowmobile parents, that are going before individuals and trying to keep them from falling or keep them from having to experience any risk or any failure whatsoever. And so that had me thinking in my own life, first personally, and then from a biblical standpoint, but we'll go personally. One, what are the big risks that I've taken in my life? And I've asked Chelsey to think about this as well, but I'll continue to drone on and bore you for a second. I think about moving here to Texas was a huge risk for me. One, I know that it's the land of opportunity, and I know there's so much richness out here, and there's so much goodness that's come from it. But I remember God's country. But I left the promised land of Tennessee, also known as the land flowing with milk and honey. And with that, my social all my social network, not my Facebook friends, but my family, my friends, connections, all that I built up over those years, and all that my family, just the rich connections that had been built because of that, to come out here to Texas and hopefully not suffer the same fate that Davy Crockett suffered when another Tennessean came out. And I thought about that was a significant risk, but that risk has paid off because I look at my life now, and I could not have imagined what would come about from that big risk. Chelsey, when you think about big risks that have taken place that you've seized after in your life, is there a particular instance that comes to mind when you think about?
There's about 50, so this might surprise our listeners. Okay. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, which is an enthusiast. Ooh. So I really like just changing it up and trying new things. I love a good risk. A spontaneous trip or vacation is like just so refreshing to me. And I'd rather be exhausted firing on all cylinders than like bored. So I can't even tell you all the risks. First would be living with 6 girls throughout college. Okay. But that ended up being one of the greatest things I ever did, even though my mom was like, you're literally going to hate this. It ended up being so beautiful. I even went with all of those friends this last weekend. We all got together with all of our babies in one house. There were literally like 25 people in one house and had the best time, and they're like the lifelong best friends, all of us. And so that was a huge risk that paid off to going to DC for a White House internship in 2008. It was Bush's last summer. And, as a broke college student, DC is never really a good financial decision. And I was so broke, but it ended up being like what catapulted me to law school and gave me a passion for policy. And there was just so many great things and doors that opened. And so I'm one of those people, if I have doors in front of me, I'm not ever going to shy away from the risky one, which is why God put me with my husband, who is a man of pros and cons lists. So every great risk I would like to take now gets vetted by Daniel Youman, who puts it in an Excel PowerPoint or Excel. I love it. He will quote unquote build a deck for me for we bought a car and he made a PowerPoint presentation for me. It's out of control. So, there's a balance there to be had, but I am, certainly one that thinks sometimes God puts doors in front of you because he wants you to take that risk. And if you can, and you're like, you can do it.
So then let's, as some of my friends would say, then let's testify about that. What have you found? What have you learned from God about the risks that you've taken?
Sure. So now we're getting deep. Well, first, I typically try not to just make a choice based on what Chelsey's feeling. Yeah. That's not necessarily taking a risk. So, I would say with this whole Human Coalition Action initiative that I've been working on, it's been the first time in my life that I truly have not moved forward until I felt affirmation from God that was the thing I needed to do. And so, to be honest, that's been an over a year in the making process in certain respects. The timing was a question, the funds are a question, everything's a big question mark, but I've learned true reliance on the Lord that he will provide and he will direct my path when I truly trust him. So
I think one of the, so as I was spending time in Pamplona, one of the things that I learned is, so again, it goes back to just this idea of the kingdom of heaven in Matthew 13:44, this idea that the kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field, which a man finds, goes and hides again, and risks everything so that he might purchase the field. And I think the kingdom of heaven is it requires risk. It requires us to risk it to get the communal biscuit. And I know that inevitably whenever we risk that, we're living in a culture that's averse to regret as well, because we often think about risks that go wrongly or regrets that plague us for eternity, which I don't think is the case, because I think the only way that you can properly risk is to be able to also understand that regret looms closely behind. But regret is a great teacher, and it's not necessarily a negative aspect of the life. And so as I've been contemplating, I think about individuals that took great risks in the biblical narrative. You've got Abraham that took a great risk to leave everything that he had in the place that he grew up in. I think about Moses that took a great risk when he decided that he was going to leave the riches of Pharaoh in order to bear the reproaches of Christ from Hebrews 11. I think about individuals like Peter, he was a fisherman. He was a successful fisherman. His business was so successful, his fishing business was so successful that after he took a 3-year stint with Jesus, he came back to that business. And so, that's a sustainable business that he came back to. He was a successful businessman that decided to take a vacate, to leave for a bit, to be able to go follow after Jesus. He took a risk. And I think, and then you think about Paul. That Paul was with the top of his class. He was a tribe of Israel. He was one of the top individuals within his tribe. But yet, at the end of the day, he took a risk and decided that he would be not only the former greatest persecutor of the church, but one of the greatest church planters that the world has ever seen. And so I if I could encourage our listeners whatsoever, just based on this time that I've been away, take a risk, feel the zest of life and feel the refreshment of knowing that the Lord's joy is very close by as you risk it to get the communal biscuit. We'll be back right after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Jeremy Morris likes to decorate for Christmas. Actually, that's underselling it by quite a bit. Jeremy Morris and his wife Christy decorate nearly every inch of their home with Christmas lights. The display in northern Idaho became such a hit at Christmas time, they decided to make it a community event. When folks would stop by to see the display, they would invite them onto their driveway for hot chocolate, a picture with Santa, and even an opportunity to share with them the biblical story of Christmas. When the Morrises decided to move into a new neighborhood, they looked at the Homeowners Association's covenants and didn't see any problem with the display. Still, wanting to be good neighbors, they gave the HOA a heads up. And that's when things took a turn. The HOA explained in a letter that some of our residents are non-Christians or of another faith, noting that they were concerned for the, quote, problems that could bring up, unquote. So on the basis of religion, they told them they could not decorate their house at Christmas, even though houses in the neighborhood are decorated for Halloween. So Jeremy filed a lawsuit, and a jury determined that the HOA violated the Fair Housing Act, engaging in religious discrimination. But soon after, a federal judge overruled the jury's verdict. First Liberty has taken on the appeal, hoping to restore the jury's verdict. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
I'm Kelly Shackelford, President and Chief Counsel of First Liberty Institute. Let me ask you, what if America's best attorneys from the very top law firms got together to defend religious freedom in court? That's exactly what's happening at First Liberty. And the best news? We're winning over 90% of our legal actions. Come learn more at firstliberty.org. You'll be encouraged. That's firstliberty.org.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm your host, Nick Pitts. This last segment, as we have affectionately been referring to it, Chelsey, I always forget. Is it called News You Can Use?
No,
news you can lose.
It's never news that our audience can use.
Okay,
it's news you can lose.
News you can lose. What we've done is we've tried to create a segment that's social science research, that's interesting about the human experience, that's prevalent within the human experience. And 3, we can point to the biblical narrative to help us understand that even though social science is always trying to keep up with the biblical narrative, that our minds are, whether it's the common line of humans, scientists climbed the top of a mountain, and they realized that theologians have been there for centuries talking about these particular truths. And so this
an
is
elitist thing to say.
Is it really?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It just
That's
kind of snobby.
It's the joke that's often used. And so here's what I wanted to talk about today, because I thought this was kind of an interesting piece that was out of Quartz magazine, and says, how soon do couples usually move in together? So according to a Quartz analysis of Stanford University's How Couples Meet and Stay Together survey, about 25% of American couples eventually move in together, do so after 4 months of dating, 50% after a year. Oh, yeah. Okay, I'm going to pause, and I just want your response, because if you're not watching right now, you might have heard Chelsey's chin just hit.
My jaw dropped. That was just really surprising to me.
Really?
After 4 months.
4 months, 25%.
That is so, just get married.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Sorry, after 4 months, that's really fast.
Yeah.
Okay, and then what was the second statistic?
4 months after 4 months, 25% of couples move in together, 50% after a year.
Okay,
and then so by 2 years, over 70% have moved in. There are holdouts, though. After more than 4 years of dating, which is a long time, 4 years of dating, 10% had not yet made the plunge. And so
to move in or get married?
To move in, because they're just measuring move in. Okay. And so for those that eventually get married, one of the researchers finds that moving in times have only slightly decreased since the 1960s. And so let's put this research into context for our purposes. The research still shows that premarital cohabitation is still associated with greater odds of divorce, despite what you continue to hear. 54% of first marriages begin with unmarried cohabitation. So for those marriages that are happening, I'm actually officiating a wedding this weekend, surprisingly enough, but they're not cohabitating, so they're in the minority, because 54% of marriages, first marriages, begin with unmarried cohabitation. In this age of cohabitation, traditional markers in a relationship have been put aside. 2 years ago, 7.2 million young adults lived together. Last year, that number rose to 8.9 million. So why are more couples cohabitating, test driving before getting married behind the marriage wheel? As millennials, it seems as though cohabitation is rising right now. Do you have a thesis, Chelsey, have a working hypothesis as to why more and more millennials, as well as, I want to include Gen Z in this as well, are cohabitating instead of, as you remarked earlier, why not just get married?
Well, for a fuller picture, just correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the statistic guy sometimes on these things. So marriage rates are lower, or they're just getting later, or both?
Marriage rates are lower. One, there's fewer marriages that are happening in the U.S. That's been declining over the past 5 years. And two, the ages have been inching up over the past 3 years. Where now, technically, they've been inching up for a long time now. Yeah. But they've slowed. It's slowed relative to that. And now
it's still to 30 to 35?
No, so it's 27, 29 right now.
Okay.
So,
in certain states.
Yeah,
And in
other states it's but
50.
From a national-wide average standpoint, it's 29 for men, 27 for women.
Right. So I think those are important statistics to include, because what we're seeing is really just an erosion of the core family unit, which is husband and wives. And then, of course, the birth rate's not even sustainable anymore. So there's a lot of ramifications besides just marriage that we're talking about from a societal standpoint. I mean, as a society, the foundation of society is husbands and wives returning to mothers and fathers, right? And then their children in that core unit. And so, the reason I think we could account for this is going to be pure conjecture, but some of it is we are the generation that followed no-fault divorce, which was created in the 80s. Reagan, that's on you. And I think, and my peers mostly saw the very detrimental impacts that divorces and that led to. And so it's kind of from what I'm hearing from my millennial friends, it's hedging your bet. We're going to test drive this, move in first, get that boost of confidence, and then move on towards marriage before we can truly commit. Now, the problem we're seeing, and my husband and I volunteer at the premarital ministry in our church, and a lot of times it's pre-engagement. And so what they'll teach us as the leaders of those tables is really the problem with that is there's a theory called sliding versus deciding. And so sliding into commitment they are finding years and years later, sometimes 25 years later, a married couple will be in counseling having major issues, and they're finding statistically one of them will say, I don't know when I committed. I don't know how we got here. There wasn't this moment in time where they made that tangible decision to commit to marrying. And that sliding is a part of that. Whereas couples who don't move in together and make that pointed one moment in time decision, I choose you for the rest of my life, they don't have the same necessary regrets or panic when things get rockier later on, because they had that, it's a commitment issue in the end. And so I think there's a lot of things contributing to it. I think our society buys the lie that we've been told you can kind of have it all and have it all first. It's all me first, right? So get your career in line, have fun, travel, spend your money on yourself, get set up for life. And that's all about you. And that's a lie, because the purpose of marriage is, it's not always happiness. There's a book on this too, The Sanctity of Marriage. It's about holiness. And they say, like, biblically speaking, there's a sanctifying process of marriage. And so if you spend all of your life on yourself, you're really missing the boat on some sanctifying opportunities earlier on. And then statistically, we know that's a lie, because if you do get married earlier on, your financial stability is actually increased. Obviously, procreation is increased. Like, there's a whole lot of like life and fulfillment that comes from marriage, that I think that really the millennials have just like a sad view, because the church hasn't been the church on the marriage front. And divorce statistics are as appalling in the church as they are elsewhere. And that's not to condemn anyone who's divorced. It's just to say that has like a lot of sad impact on children and their views on commitment in marriage. And I can't speak personally to all of that, but that's just what I've seen in my groups.
Yeah, I think you're right on a number of things. I think you're right on with relative to the societal impact that it's having. That we're obviously, of course, birth rate is going to go down when there's fewer marriages. Of course, we're just seeing a lot of those societal impacts when individuals aren't making that hard yes commitment. And I think one of the things that I see is that you hit really point on there is that we are the no fault divorce generation. There's just praise be to God, there's fewer divorces that are happening today than have been happening in the past. But I think individuals that had a front row seat to divorce don't want to be center stage in a divorce now. And so they've seen the hurt that come from a divorce, and now they don't want to be a part of a divorce, and that's created a bit of risk.
Which is fair. That's totally fair. But I mean,
you got to go back to the previous segment. You got to risk it, right? And so I think there's that piece and that component. But I also think this whole test driving mentality, and now we're coming up to the end, but the test driving mentality just proves to be you're not test driving anything. You're just driving back. It's not driving to a good place with this, because trying to figure out a better thing, you need a hard commitment. So instead of test driving, biblically commit. That's all I would say. Nevertheless, we have got to go. We've got to end it. I wish I would have given this 2 segments. I feel like we could have kept on going on this. But nevertheless, thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much, Steve, and everyone else. And thank you for listening. We'll be back here next week.
So you sit down and do your budget, and you look at all your monthly costs and your bills and your income, and it seems like there's never quite enough. You know what would really help? Finding $500 a month to help balance things out. That is the typical savings, $500 a month for a family when you switch to MediShare for your health care. And when it comes to healthcare sharing ministries, MediShare is really the gold standard. It's been around for 25 years and has more than 400,000 members. It's been around so long and grown so much because it works. And whether you're single or married or have kids, this could make sitting down to do a monthly budget a lot more fun. $500 a month can more than cover a car payment or pay back loans, whatever. So join MediShare and go out to dinner to celebrate. Here's the number to call. They are incredibly kind and helpful to talk to. 855-90-BIBLE. That's 855-90-BIBLE. 855-90-BIBLE.
Tired of fake news? Support truth. Join Point of View's Truth Team and bring healing to America. Go to pointofview.net/team. pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.